Hello, my name is Mark Dulin and welcome to Mark's Mouthpiece. This week my guest is Julie Landsman, former principal horn of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra and currently professor of horn at the Juilliard School in the University of Southern California. Julie will discuss her early years, her lessons with Carmine Caruso, her time auditioning, her time as a freelancer in New York City, as well as her positions in the Houston Symphony and the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. She'll also be discussing her pedagogy and her favorite singers. Also on this, you'll have special guest Marie Speziali, former Associate Principal Trumpet of the Cincinnati Symphony, Jen Montone, Principal Horn of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and Nathaniel Silberschlag, Principal Horn of the Cleveland Orchestra. These interviews are brought to you by Dulin Music. You can visit them online at dulinmusic.com, where they have everything a brass player could ever need. Also, Studio 259 Productions. That is the home of Vincent Chikowitz Pedagogical Materials, and you can see that at studio259productions.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Mark's Mouthpiece. Enjoy the interview.
Well, and when he would come in, how often would he come in to see the band?
I'm not sure, Wayne. Do you remember how often Carmine actually came to the band rehearsals? Can't hear him.
Oh,
He's muted.
It was occasionally only. You know, he didn't come often. But Joe seemed to know a lot of his method.
And also, Joe got my horn teacher, Howard, involved with Carmine. Carmine also worked with my teacher, and I would go see Carmine for private lessons as well. So I had Carmine from a very young age. Lucky me.
yeah. Now, so you were seeing Carmine sometimes and Howard at the same time. Is that right?
And while I was at Juilliard studying with Jimmy Chambers, I had weekly lessons with Carmine for at least my first year. I did not tell Mr. Chambers. It would not have been sanctioned, but it worked for me.
Gotcha. Well, so let's talk a little bit about your studying with Howard T. Howard, and then we'll come back to Caruso in a bit. What were those lessons like with your future colleague?
My lessons with Howard were very inspiring. His goal as my teacher was to teach me to teach myself. And he would model at lessons how to practice and how to teach myself, which is what I do with my students today. So his influence on me are very far-reaching and still doing their magic with my students.
What kind of things were you practicing with him at an early age?
The usual, Koprosh. We did some solo work. My favorite work at that time was Adagio and Allegro. So in sixth grade, I was playing some pretty difficult stuff that I didn't know hard. I had no clue.
Yeah.
I just played it because I loved it. So I did a good variety with him of excerpts and solo music and etudes.
So how much time were you putting in as a young student like that on the horn?
A lot. There was a storage closet across from our band room in Ardsley High, and I lived in that funky closet. I started days in the closet there, doing my Carusos and practicing, and it was my escape from school, which I really felt was necessary for me. I was not the greatest student, but I was a wonderful practicer.
Right, right. So was there a lot of music around your house when you were growing up?
No, not at all. I grew up in a traditional conservative Jewish household, so the music I heard might have been songs that we sang at temple or on the holidays. My mother, though, did buy me two records when I started the French horn. One was Capriccio Espagnol and Italien, and the other was the Brahms Horn Trio. And I would play along with the records as a way of inspiring myself. But there was very little music in my house. Nobody was musical. It was my thing, and I needed my own thing, which turned out to be fantastic.
And who was playing the Brahms and the Tchaikovsky pieces?
Well, the Brahms was the Dennis Brain recording. There's a very old one, and also a Jimmy Stagliano, the former first horn of BS. So I had two Brahms recordings, and I have no recollection as to what orchestra were playing the Capriccio Italian and Espanol. I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. Well, those are pretty great models that you had on the Brahms to check out for sure.
Yeah.
Now, did you start listening more as you grew, as you were a teenager? Did you start kind of collecting some things or things to model?
I started going to the opera because my teacher, Howard Howard, was the first horn. And my best friend, Michael Goldring, and I were standees at the opera. Wayne remembers Michael because Michael played bass in our band, of all godforsaken things to play in a band. And we were opera standees. So we would go 5 times a week to stand at the Met. And
Wow.
it was such a beautiful education. And that's where my dreams began, that I wanted to sit in that pit and be the first horn of the Met. I was probably 13 when I made that decision.
Wow. Wow.
I know.
And to be going at that age, you must have heard sort of an older generation of singers too that were
Oh, yeah.
no longer there when you got in the orchestra. Do you remember who any of those were?
Franco Corelli, Renata Tebaldi, Birgit Nielsen, although Birgit came to one gala that I played. These were my mentors. McCracken, James McCracken, the tenor, um, Carreras. I might have even worked with Carreras a little bit. I had such a beautiful exposure to the best singers. Joan Sutherland. Oh my God, I was smitten with Joan Sutherland. Anything Joan did, I was there.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's that's amazing. So you already started with the principal horn in the Met, Carmine Caruso, and you're hearing all these incredible singers at the same time.
I am. And in fact, I'm privileged to tell you that one of my neighbors in my new area in Santa Barbara is Marilyn Horn. And I was there for Marilyn's debut when I was in high school. She and Joan Sutherland were singing Norma. Marilyn was Adalgisa. The first note that Marilyn sang was the most gorgeous pianissimo that I had ever heard to date. And it projected to the last row of the Met, which is a big opera house,
Yeah.
to the standing room where I was standing. And I just made a decision then that I was going to sound just like Marilyn Horn. Little did I know we would be living up the street from each other. And she's my friend. I feel so lucky.
That's amazing. I mean, there's that great Bernstein recording with the Met with McCracken and Marilyn Horn doing Carmen. It's
Yes.
a terrific recording. And then, of course, we'll talk about Levine a little bit later. But the Mahler stuff we did with Chicago Symphony with her doing Mahler 3 is just fantastic. So that's amazing that she's your neighbor.
She was an amazing singer, an amazing pedagogue, because I'm now at the Music Academy of the West as a teacher for the past 8 summers, and Marilyn Horn has been intrinsically involved there. So lucky me, I've gotten to hear each master classes. It's been a beautiful career.
Wow. Is there, well, while we're on this topic of singers like Marilyn Horn that you've seen do classes, what things do you hear out of those classes that translate into the way we teach brass? Are there any phrases that you steal all the time?
I'm going to be very specific that things that I feel resonate for me when Marilyn teaches her classes is the emphasis on tone. And it's a sad, dying art of beautiful tone. Things have really, really shifted away from being sound centered to being technique centered. And to me, that's not a lovely shift. Tone is everything. Tone as a singer, tone as a French horn player, tuba player, trumpet player. It's the sound that's your personal signature and stamp. And that's what I honor. And I believe when I've heard Marilyn work with her students, she's very hard, as I am with my kids, in the pursuit of excellence. But it's not about the technique. It's about the sound.
Right, right. Are there any kind of descriptions that you've heard, or what descriptions do you do with students to get them to have a certain sound?
Oh, there's so many. I'll throw out just some words, but then I'm going to go to another part of what it, for me, takes a good sound. I would say centered, core, warmth, expressivity, and tonal variety, depending on the emotional content of the music that you're making. So there's so many levels of espressivo and personal. And in order to really achieve that, yes, you need great technique, great support, the right setup with your chops, a good steady airstream. You need all of the technical pieces in place. But what you mostly need is to connect right here.
Yeah.
That's where sound lives. It lives in the heart. And if you can connect your musicality to your heart, your tone will go places you cannot imagine.
Yeah, I mean I think that's so true, and it's so true of the Met Orchestra too. I mean that's such a unique sounding orchestra because the way it always has to blend with the singers and react to them. So it's unusual in that way, I think.
Yeah, it was so fun to play with these amazing singers. I left Pavarotti out of the conversation, but I heard him as a youngster, but also I was there for his last performance. So he was there throughout most of my tenure. But to hear the sound of these singers, and I mean, I was looking right up at them. Unbelievable view of their support, of their mouths, hearing their sounds. It's like, just bring it on.
Were there any, I mean, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but were there any singers that you would think about for a certain sound on the horn? You know, like I think that way with the trumpet, sometimes there's a certain register that this person sounds like, there's a certain register that that person sounds like.
I would go right to Marilyn Horn because that is the tone that I emulated, and it's incredible core, incredible warmth and production, good pitch center. Her technique is flawless, but it was her sound that knocked my socks off, and that would be what I'd want to emulate overall.
Yeah.
But if talking about playing a piece like Julius Caesar, where the horn part is in the descant register, there's a myriad of other sopranos that I might pull out. For example, Kathy Battle or Ruth Ann Swenson or Dawn Upshaw. These are the sopranos that I grew up, played with at the Met, who had a huge impact on my sound concept. I was there for Renee Fleming when she won the National Council, and I remember what she sounded like. I want to sound like that too. So I don't think there's one answer. One size does not fit all when it comes to singers to emulate or tone, because there's the variety of tone that turns me on.
Right. Absolutely. So kind of going back to a little bit of your younger days before the Met, can you you started Juilliard in 1971 after a really great time with Mr. Howard, and
Yeah.
And then you started with James Chambers. I wonder if you could talk about two things: a little bit about the era, some of the brass players you were with during that time, and then the studies with Mr. Chambers. What was that? Were they like?
Well, speaking of trumpet players, Bill Vacchiano was on my Juilliard audition committee, which kind of flipped me out. And I remember him walking over to me, and I think Joe Sink, who was the associate principal horn of the Philharmonic, was also on that audition committee. And I think he asked me for something that I wasn't doing, and Bill Vacchiano just kind of shut him right down. He said, "Oh, she sounds great. Leave her alone." So he was very protective toward me in a really sweet way. During that time, there was also one of the Burv brothers was on my audition committee. Harry Burv was there. Very classy gentleman. Rainier D'Antinis was there, the former third horn of the Philharmonic. And I actually wound up studying with Dinny a little bit because Mr. Chambers got sick quite often in my last 2 years of Juilliard. So really I had 2 full years with Jimmy Chambers. And then it was a little bit of a mix and match.
Right. Right. And you would have had, and some of the students at that time, Phil Smith was in school with you. Is this right? Am I
I
thinking?
met with Phil.
You played in a quintet with Phil.
Did. He was amazing then.
And was Ed Carroll in school with you then too?
Eddie was in school with me too. He was a star. And
Yeah.
he was also Barry Schwartz's protege. So there was a lot of Eddie in he was very prominent in the New York for quite a while.
Yeah. Wow. But a quintet with Phil Smith. Well, that's pretty good.
Where, where do you go from there?
Right.
So, Mark Gould, where is that menace?
Well, so what were the lessons like with Chambers? At this point, he wasn't playing anymore. Is that right?
He wasn't, and we had a little tough time. I wasn't the kind of student that just said, yes, Mr. Definitely, okay, anything you say, boss. That's sort of not my personality. So I would say, why? Why do you want me to do it like that? And it pissed him off. He did not want me pushing on him. He did not want me asking questions. He wanted me to listen and do as I was told. In fact, the summer before I went to Aspen, which was right between my first and second year at Juilliard, I was playing on a Farkas model original mouthpiece, which is a little trumpety thing, speaking of it.
Yes.
And I was about to go study with Phil Farkas in Aspen. And I don't know if this had anything to do with what Mr. Chambers said to me, but he looked at my mouthpiece. He said, here, try this mouthpiece. And I burst out in tears. I said, why? Why do I have to play that? He said, well, if you don't play this, I'm kicking you out of my studio.
Wow.
So I still play kind of on that mouthpiece. There's been some iterations of it, but in retrospect, I had a feeling maybe he didn't want me to go to Farkas on a Farkas mouthpiece as a Chambers student, but I'm making that up. I don't know if it's true. I just couldn't, or maybe he was smartly waiting to the summer for me to change equipment. But Carmine had always told me, it's not the equipment, it's you. Right. So there was never conversation about changing anything in my equipment until this moment of hysterical tears when I said to Mr. Chambers, it's going to ruin me.
That didn't happen, obviously.
Well, and no drama there, right?
Right. So you studied with Phil Farkas in the summer at Aspen. What were those lessons like with Mr. Farkas?
They were good. I still have some drawings in my Maxime Alphonse book of him demonstrating with drawing what a crescendo would look like. I think I was woofing. Do you trumpet players use the word woofing?
Oh, sadly, yes.
Wah on a note, or in a crescendo, there'd be an uneven dynamic change. So he actually drew out what he wanted my crescendo to look like. And I believe the visual aid was very, very helpful to me.
Yeah. By the way, what kind of horn was he playing at that time?
He wasn't playing. At that time, Uncle Phil, as we called him, was an old guy. And I don't think he had any horn. He didn't play in the orchestra. There were other people occupying the chairs, and he was part of the teaching staff at Aspen. That was the summer of 1972. Were you born yet, Mark?
Almost 73. Very close. Very close. I was thought about maybe. Who knows? So your lessons with Chambers, what kind of material was it? Still a lot of excerpts, a lot of etudes, and
it was Paret's scales. Big Time, which is a very French horn scale book. I don't know if you know about it.
We have that one. Yep.
It was Coprash 1, Coprash 2, Mueller 8 studies, 12 studies of Gallet, 40 Gallet preludes, Kling 40 studies, all etudes. Never once did we work on excerpts nor solos. Just wasn't his thing.
Wow.
Oh. I know. Shocking.
And so when after you graduated, can you kind of talk about that period in New York? You were pretty busy at that point.
Yeah, I got a job with the National Ballet of Canada right when I graduated from JUILLIARD in 1975. And at that time, I had a boyfriend in the Toronto Symphony, and the National Ballet of Canada was based in Toronto. And I thought, oh, I want to go hang out with Scott Wilson. So I'm going to win that audition and spend as much time as I can with him in Toronto in between touring with the National Ballet of Canada. And it was a great education. Plus, at that time, the Canadian dollar was worth less than the US, or was it more? I think less. So when I would convert it into US dollars, my pockets were just spilling over with lots of cash. So I made the money, but I got some really good experience playing beautiful ballets and touring all over Canada.
That sounds like a nice place to be right now.
It was a nice place to be then, and it would be lovely to be there now as well. So after my stint with the National Ballet of Canada, I came back to New York and I freelanced quite a bit. I played extra with the New York Philharmonic. I played extra with the Metropolitan Opera. I played on Broadway. I did quite a few shows. And I was frustrated. I wanted to be the first horn player in all of the gigs I played, and I wasn't. And that wasn't okay for me. I was very eager, very, very hungry. And I remember having a conversation with Phil Myers, the former principal horn of the Philharmonic. And he said, you want to play first horn? You need to leave town. You need to win a job as a first horn player and get out of New York before anyone's going to consider you for that. So I did exactly what Phil told me. I won the Houston Symphony principal horn job in 1982, I think.
Right.
I spent 3 years or maybe 2 or 3 years with the Houston Symphony as principal horn. Actually, it was co-principal. Tom Bacon was the other first horn.
Okay.
And I cut my teeth in Houston as a first horn player in an orchestra, which was a really good thing before stepping into the Met. Those were some big shoes to fill.
Yeah. Well, going back to the playing you did with the Philharmonic and the Met, do you remember the first time you played with those two groups?
I do. I was hired to play extra horn with the Met backstage on Tannhauser. Or was it Tristan? No, I think it was Tannhauser. And there were, I don't know, 16 horns backstage. I've lost count. So I was part of the group, but they put me on the first horn part. And I was a kid, but I guess my reputation preceded me. I'm not sure how I got to that chair. So it was a little terrifying, but to be surrounded by that many horns backstage at the Met was phenomenal. And to this day, anytime I walk through the backstage area of the Met, I basically kiss the ground because this is my holy worship place. I love the Met. I love my work there. I love playing there. I love listening to operas there. And I just want to say how heartbroken I am and dismayed and actually pissed off that the management has been so unwilling to take care of this beautiful orchestra. They are suffering, and it's not okay with me. Yeah. I'm glad I'm not there because I would be even more upset, but I am troubled for my colleagues, and what that's doing to my former beautiful orchestra is not okay. That's right. It. I'm done with anger. I just needed to say.
No, I'm glad you did, and I agree. It's a shame that 2/3 of the orchestra has moved out of New York at this point, I think.
And selling their houses, and they can't pay their rent.
Right.
Then they're living off of unemployment, and they have a family of 5. Some of my former students are in the horn section, and they're suffering. Yeah. That just stinks.
Yeah. And to your Philharmonic experience, wasn't James Chambers the personnel manager when you were subbing?
He was. He was tough as nails. He scared the pants off of me always.
Yes. Yeah.
Very strict, Teutonic man.
Yeah. Were there any did you do any recording with those groups while you were freelancing?
Oh, yeah. I recorded a lot with the Philharmonic. Meta was conducting many of the recordings. I think Andrew Davis conducted the Heldenleben. I did quite a few recordings and a lot of touring with the Philharmonic, and that's a gas. That orchestra knows how to tour.
Yeah.
They take super good care of their musicians, and if they don't, the musicians revolt. And you do not want to be around the New York film musicians when they're in revolution. It's not a pretty sight. I've seen it. When anything went wrong, there was a terrible scene made always on these tours. So the management really kept it together for us.
Wow. Wow. But then kind of jumping back to where we were going with Houston, what kind of adjustments did you make? Did you feel like you made in your playing, or what changed in your playing when you got into Houston Symphony?
Well, I started using a tuner. I think that was a good thing. Up to that point, I was tuner free, and I got in the orchestra. I was like half a step sharp. It's like, no, this is not going to work. So that was good. I think it was a good education because there were some very touchy exposed pieces that I played with them. And in fact, some recordings, I believe I'm on the Scheherazade recording with Commissiona.
Uh-huh.
And it was good. I played a lot of Mahler symphonies, Shostakovich symphonies, a good education for me.
Was Commissiona the music director there?
He was. He's the guy who hired me.
Oh, great.
And we knew each other from Aspen, from that summer I was there. I believe, was he the music director in Aspen at that time? He might have been.
Yeah.
So we knew each other. In fact, when I was in Aspen this summer of 72, I came out to my car, which was a green Opel Kadett, a really old car, and it had been scraped in the back, and there was a note on my windshield saying, "So sorry, Sergio Commissiona." Yeah.
I played for him one time. I thought he was terrific and had incredible ears.
He was terrific, but I have to say there were a few times he let me down. And one example was after I won the Met job, and we were doing the Mendelssohn Midsummer Night Dream in Houston. It was like my last week of concerts. And there's a tremendous horn solo called the Nocturne.
Oh yeah.
And I played, and it's a trio, I believe, or a quartet, second horn and first bassoon, or maybe first and second bassoon. And I was doing my thing. I was playing it, and he said, too loud, too loud. What do you think this is, Metropolitan Opera?
You had clearly already won the audition by that point, right?
Oh, yeah, I had already said goodbye to him. He obviously took it personally, which was so not accurate. And it made me very convinced that I made the right choice to get out of there.
Right. Right. Now, was John DeWitt playing principal trumpet when you were in the orchestra?
Was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Great player. Great trumpet
Yeah,
player.
sweetheart.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about what was your preparation like for Houston, because that was really the first major job you won. Can you talk about that preparation?
The preparation for the audition?
Yeah.
It was in New York. It was a private audition. They had already held national auditions, and they didn't hire anybody. So Commissiona called up the Boston Symphony Orchestra general manager, the late Gideon Teplitz, who wound up being the general manager of the Houston Symphony. But at that time, Gideon was working for the Boston Symphony. I think assistant or something. I'm not sure what Gideon did there, but they had just listened to horn auditions for their associate principal opening. I got nowhere in those auditions, but I must have made a good impression because they gave Gideon my name and one other young woman's name, and the two of us were invited to play private auditions. The other lady named Nona was in Boston. I was in New York. And Commissiona and I met at Carol's studio. Have you ever been to Carol's studio?
No, I haven't.
funky in the middle of Midtown on the very far west side, near the highway, near the Lincoln Tunnel. And we met in one of those rehearsal studios at Carroll's, and I played a private audition for him, which apparently was good enough to earn me a plane ticket and an invitation to play an audition for the Houston Symphony. I played my excerpts from the list, and then they had me play excerpts with the orchestra. They chose me over Nona to play another audition. It'll be my third round with the orchestra with all the latest and greatest French horn solos.
Right. Wow. Now,
Yeah.
and when you won that job in Houston, were there any other female horn players playing in major orchestras other than you and Gail Williams?
Oh, good question. Not that I'm aware of, but there were some people before then. There was Ethel Merker, who played in the Chicago Symphony.
Right.
There was, I'm forgetting her name, a woman in the New York City Ballet, and forgive me for forgetting her name. I didn't know her.
Yeah.
So there was some, Connie Weldon, I think, was around, maybe in the Chicago area. So there were a few scattered about,
Right.
but not that many.
Right. Right. And so let's fast forward a little bit and talk about the preparation for the Met. Can you talk about how you prepared for your dream job?
Yeah, that was an exciting summer. It was the summer of 1984, and there were Olympics happening that summer. So while I was preparing for my audition, several fortuitous events took place. One, I got to watch the Olympics, and I got to watch how they competed. And one particular Olympian, Nadia Comaneci, who won that year, influenced me tremendously as far as what she did before she went out and did her routine. I'm more interested in the backstage events than the onstage events. What do players do, or what do dancers do? Because I was in ABT, in American Ballet Theater, for quite a few years, and I got to watch Baryshnikov backstage. Much more interesting to me than watching him on stage. Similarly, when I watch players get ready to go out to play their audition, or the competitors in the Olympics, I get to watch how they get their heads together, how they psych themselves up, the rhythm that they feel through their body, the way they get loose, the way they breathe, the way they put their focus and their attention before they go out and do their very short but important stint. And that taught me so much about the art of competition.
What did you see Baryshnikov doing that you found interesting when you were doing the ABT?
He was quiet, which I like to be when I'm backstage. Please don't talk to me. Don't bother me. I'm in my own space. Other people get very chatty and they need to release their nervous energy. Not this girl. Leave me alone. Let me be calm. And I noticed with Baryshnikov similarly, he was in his own world. If he needed to release energy or build energy up, he did it physically by shaking out or doing jumps. But basically, I just got to watch his focus come into play and what it took for him before he went out there. And he would go out with so much energy, because usually it was one of the variations with all the male twirling around. So fun. Yeah.
Wow. And I guess preparing for the Met, I mean, you had grown up listening to so much music there.
Yeah.
That had to be in many ways a big advantage because you knew the story,
And I knew what they liked, but I also mentioned there were several fortuitous events the summer before my audition. One of them was going to visit Carmine Caruso and Laurie Frink at their cabin in Roscoe, New York. I went up to the cabin, I think it was in July or August. My audition for the Met was October 4th. So I was preparing all summer. And when I went to see Carmine and Laurie, they taught me a new exercise that I hadn't learned from Carmine in high school. It's called lips, mouthpiece, horn, which is on my Caruso videos for anyone who's curious. And Lori was the one who demonstrated it to me. And her lip buzz burned holes in my ear, just like I remember Marilyn Horne's sound
Right.
in the Met. I remember Laurie Frink's sound on lips, mouthpiece, horn. It was just like, whoa. I thought that was normal. So that was the sound that I always went for, especially on the lips. To me, it seemed, that's a good sound. I'll go for that.
Yeah.
So that huge breakthrough for me when I started lips, mouthpiece, horn that summer. It brought in another dimension of my core and my projection and my pitch center. It was a beautiful timing, beautifully timed.
Wow. And so what, when you're preparing all this music that, like I said, you at least had an idea. I think most of us, when we take an opera audition and we're just so used to standard orchestral repertoire, it's like you're learning a whole nother language very, very quickly. Were there any breakthroughs with some of the repertoire that you needed before the audition that you remember?
I had to prepare some licks for Motello, and the only breakthrough was my technique kind of stunk. I think very fast. Please don't ask me to play it today. But at that point, boy, did I have to woodshed that. It's in the key of E, which is very squirrely fingering. There was a lot of technical things for me to learn. The pieces that I related to really easily were things like Ariadne of Naxos, which is very lyrical, huge skips, and that fit right into the kind of practicing and playing that really resonated with me. But the ones that I really had to spend time in, mostly I'm thinking of the Otello. The long call was on my audition, but I'd been practicing that since I was a kid in high school. So it was a walk in the park. Honestly, that was no big shakes for me. And it actually, I believe, is what helped win me the Met audition.
Wow. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that day you won the audition. First of all, your family's in the New York area, so they must have lost their minds that you were coming home to after that audition.
My father's birthday. His birthday was October 4th. I won the audition on October 4th. And I went directly to my family's house. They were all gathered in New York at my sister's house for my father's birthday party. And it turns out it was also a celebration of my winning the Met audition. It was an auspicious day.
I bet so. The Met, for a lot of people that don't realize it, the screen is up the whole time, right?
Thank goodness.
Right. So talk about that a little bit. What happened? What was it like after you came out behind the screen?
Are we talking about the book Blink?
Well, that was one of my questions tonight, but sure. Just tell me about that day, what that was like when you came out from behind the screen. Was it a jaw-dropping moment for some people?
Well, I think most of the committee expected a man. I think they had a couple of particular men they were expecting, and 99% of the committee gasped when they saw a young woman walk out. And along with their gasping, they walked to the back of the room and turned their backs on me. So I was running a little video because I was in shock. So I basically asked myself to have a video of this in my mind so I could review it later.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't take it all in. It was too much.
Yeah.
But I do remember the guys who turned their backs on me. Those are things you don't forget. And I do remember the few that came up and had the wherewithal and decency to congratulate me. Mark Gould was one of them.
Yeah.
We knew each other. And Howard was another one. Of course, we knew each other. And so was Jimmy Levine, my new boss. Those three guys came right up to me and gave me hearty congratulations. The rest of them were a little too freaked out to be gentlemanly and professional at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Well, talk about that. So obviously that kind of reaction happened. How did you navigate? I mean, obviously you had to play great when you got on the job, but what other did you have to navigate anything else? I mean, politically or just mentally to kind of deal with the day to day when you first got the job?
Yeah, yeah, it was hard. It was really stressful. It became a lifestyle. Every day that I lived post starting at the Met was about my job. What do I have to do today to do my best work? And for me, my best was 500%. So I put tremendous pressure on myself to deliver excellence at all times.
Yeah.
A lot.
Was there a point at which where the people who turned their backs on you eventually warmed up and realized that you were the right person for the job?
I don't think so, but there was a time I turned my backs on them.
Very good. These things happen. An audience would never know how much kind of stuff goes on in an orchestra, but there are things. Yeah, there
I'm,
are
I'm
things.
not a mean spirited person, but I like support and I like to offer support. And I like to run my section by showing how excellent you can sound.
Yeah,
That's my power in the playing, not in strong arming or bullying. And they were used to the strong arming bullying style. They weren't going to get that from me, but they tried that out on me, and it was very uncomfortable.
yeah.
Very.
But going back to who you talked about before, Levine had your back apparently, and you had support from Gould, I'm sure. So talk
Yeah,
about
if as much support as one can get from Gould, he's an adversarial character, so we duked it out regularly. But
yes,
yeah, he had my back too. He did.
yeah, yeah. And Levine had your back. Talk about how Levine influenced your playing and your thinking about music.
Big time. Huge, 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 huge influence. He was all about sound and blend. As an accompaniment, we needed to find a way as horn players to not drown the singers out, but still be heard and blend. And he was relentless with us about dynamic, about articulation, about tone quality, about balance, about style. Never backed off for a minute. He always had things to say, which after a while was stressful, but it also taught me so much, particularly about Mozart. I loved doing Mozart, Jimmy. In fact, we've recorded quite a few Mozart pieces together. Most notably, I'll say, is The Marriage of Figaro. Very profound influence on my style and concept of Mozart, for sure.
Right. Do you remember anything in particular that he would say, or any kind of verbiage that resonated with you about sound or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, actually, I remember one year I had changed my way of supporting. Um, I guess I had about 3 more years to go at the Met, and I just felt like the support that I had been using, which was the old school of kind of pooching out your belly and playing off of a hard, distended abdomen,
Right.
it ran its course. Things were not good, not feeling good. I was not happy. So I actually went and started to study Alexander technique with Laurie Sheff, who is one of the Alexander teachers at Juilliard. And she also was working at that time with the Young Artist Program at the Met. And we revamped my breathing so that my support to this day has been totally changed. Now, what's significant about that is that Jimmy noticed a change in my sound from the end of the season before the summer I changed my support to the beginning of the next season with the new support. He came up to me after rehearsal. He liked to call me baby. He said, "Baby, what's different? Have you changed horns? Your sound is so beautiful. Have you changed? What's going on?" I said, "No, no, no. It's the same horn. Thank you. I'm glad you noticed." I didn't really want to talk to him about support or anything. Just thanked him for complimenting my sound, which I guess I thought it was good before, but I guess it got better.
Wow.
Whatever.
Wow.
Yeah.
And talk a little about the relationship you had with Howard T. Howard once you two were colleagues. You're figuring out your season or the arrangements of who's going to do what.
Well, Howard had his wishes. He had been there a very long time. And as the new kid on the block, I absolutely backed off. So when negotiating with Howard about who would play what, he always got what he wanted. And that was fine with me. I was the new kid on the block. He was my teacher, and I wasn't going to make waves.
Right, right. Now, so what recordings would you say were your favorite things that you did at the Met, if you had to name a couple? The Mozart,
How about
probably.
we could start with the ring cycle?
The Ring Cycle, yeah. That's mostly you playing principal in that cycle, right?
Quite a bit. I believe my name is even on the second side of Siegfried because I did the long call. And they put my name on the album, which made me really, really happy. So those were some tough recording sessions, but we did it over a period of a few years.
Right.
Very exciting. Hard work. Done. Project well done. We also recorded the Eroica with Jimmy and the Schubert Unfinished Symphony. So that's fun because I've got some symphony recordings out there with him as well.
Right. What would you say the differences would be, or the challenges would be that are different playing an opera orchestra versus playing a symphony orchestra on stage every week?
It's very different. Very different. And imagine my shock when our first orchestra concert was the Rite of Spring. And after 10 or 15 years of Jimmy going like this to the horns, too loud, take the bulk out of your sound. We get on stage with the Rite of Spring and it's like, where's your sound? Bring it on. I thought, well, wait a minute. I just spent 15 years not doing that, which I used to do all the time.
Right.
So it's a huge adjustment on volume and output.
Right.
And cannot play that way in the Met Pit. It just doesn't sell tickets. It doesn't work.
Well, what about the amount of time where you're not playing in an opera? Like there can be longer breaks. I mean, you can even leave the pit at times. I mean, how did you keep the focus when you were not always 100% in the game all the time?
I listen. I listen to the singers. I listen to my colleagues. I love what I do. I loved what I did at the Met. And to me, it was a picnic.
Yeah.
A picnic of sound and voice.
Wow. And so, and 25 years later, there you were. And we were talking about this before we kind of came on, and I was going to ask if you had any stories about any of your colleagues, particularly your trumpet colleagues. I think there's a famous Mel Broyles story from Cavalier.
I have maybe two Mel stories. I'll tell you you want the funny one or the sad one?
Well, let's go sad to funny.
Sad to funny. We were playing Rosenkavalier, and there's a famous trumpet lick at the end that goes up to a high D flat.
Yeah.
And Mel hit, and he was literally right behind me. And it was at that moment when he hit the D flat that he had a stroke. And he collapsed. I get goosebumps remembering it. He collapsed right behind me. I know. Wow. It kind of freaks me out. And he was wheeled out of the Met, never to return. That was his final farewell, that D flat. It was rough. It was rough on all of us.
Yeah, yeah.
I met his daughter recently, though. We're doing the alumni of the Met are trying to help the current members who are suffering. So we had a reunion with 80 members and family members to brainstorm how can we raise funds and raise awareness for our current colleagues. And who was on there but Karen D'Angelo, whose last name really was Broyles. This is Mel's daughter. She looks like Mel. So cool. She and I have had a little bit of contact because I had to write to her and tell her what a formidable man her father was. So here's the good Mel story.
Yes.
The fun story. We were on tour in Japan, and we were under the stage, backstage with all the cases and hanging out and warming up. And Mel and I happened to be in the same little dungeness area. And I said something to Mel like, "You're so unique. You're just one of a kind." And he said, "That's right, Julie. They threw the mold out after they made me." Okay. It says a lot. I think they did.
That
I have
that is true.
one more funny Mel story. After Mel would play his solo, he would pull the trumpet away from his mouth with great drama and then go kiss the mouthpiece. He had never heard anything so good.
Wow.
Cracked me up.
He was a very strong trumpet player. He was
Strong trumpet player, strong personality, big influence. By the time I got to the Met, he wasn't in the top dog position Gould was.
right.
But before that, Mel ran the show down there. Before my time when I was a standee, it was very much the Mel Broyle show, especially the onstage Aida trumpets. Boy, did he love those.
Jim Pandolfi's told me about these many times.
Dolph, I love Dolph.
Yeah, yeah, we all do. Yeah, he's great, and someday I'm going to get him to do this. So
That would be awesome.
yeah, he said when this thing backs off, he'll do it. He'll do it. So can you talk a little bit about? Let's talk about teaching a little bit, because you've been obviously a very successful teacher. What kind of qualities have you noticed with the students that come to you that where you know that they're going to do it?
Well, I think talent comes in many forms. You can have the most naturally gifted player who doesn't practice. And I've had those, and they're the most frustrating because you know they could be amazing, but they don't do their work.
Right.
And I find that just unfathomable. I always practiced. That was my saving grace, that I had something I did well and could excel at. Oh, did Jen Montone just show up? Is there a
Speaking,
reason?
there is a reason that she's there. Hi, Jen.
Hello. Surprise.
Hey, sweetheart, how are you?
I'm good. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Speaking of successful students, Jen, could you talk a little bit about your lessons with Julie and what kind of an impact that was?
Oh, incredible impact. She's remarkable, as you know, and as you're talking about. This is such a great interview. So I guess, it was very powerful on a bunch of different levels working with you, Julie. The whole thing of looking at each of your students exactly as they are right in front of you in that moment has made such a big difference in my life just in general. And I loved the honesty. I loved the sort of the passion and the discipline that you instill, and then also like the unconditional support, and love that comes across very clearly to all of your students. It's like it's just a magical combination of sort of just really, really wonderful role model and support system, and obviously technical instruction as well. So it's a really beautiful thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think there's somebody else who wants to say hello to you that's just signing in right now.
Is this thing on?
Oh
There he
my
is.
God. It's Boy,
Hello.
how are you, dear?
Doing really well. Just enjoying this amazing interview.
Yeah.
I'm learning stuff.
What are you learning? What didn't you already know?
I gotta say that I'm thoroughly enjoying all the Met stories. Those are special for sure.
Yeah.
Julie, what's it like? What's it like to know that you have two of the big five principal horn players out of your studio? Do you remember those? You got those
I'm not.
calls?
There's going to be more. Just wait. Just fun.
What did it feel like when you got those phone calls from Jen and Nathaniel?
Well, Jen had many phone calls to make to me because she won so many auditions. So it's hard to separate which one. But I think I was at some of your auditions. Didn't you audition live in Carnegie Hall? Was that with St. Louis?
Well, that was one of my trial weeks, was with Philly, was at Carnegie. Yeah.
Oh,
And it's true, you did come.
you bought me a ticket for that. And but what about when I came to hear you play with David Robertson? Were you already hired at that point?
I think so, but yeah, you have been a very big part of a lot of special moments for me, kind of
Yeah.
before, during, and after.
And before that, she won Jersey. I mean, there were so many Jen moments, hard to separate them all, but I can tell you a very special one. Do you remember when you played Rosenkavalier Suite and was it Brahms 3 in
And
Carnegie
Brahms too.
on my AD? You played it on the con. I was sitting in the audience weeping. I was a complete puddle because I knew she was playing for me and it was on my horn and I lost it. I absolutely could not get my stuff together.
Pretty emotional for me too. I loved seeing that, the whole 8D thing that you guys put together, all of you, that recording thing that you put on Facebook. It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
Love that so many of your students still play that horn.
It's a beautiful thing. Nathaniel's one of them. And Mark, you probably aren't aware of the ins and outs of horn politics. Am I correct?
I have a general sense that there's AD sections and there are not AD sections.
Oh, well, that's good enough. That'll do. So, when I was at the Met, it was an 8D section. I think 9 out of the 10 players. And Nathaniel's in an all 8D section. And he was in an all 8D section before that with the Washington National Opera, where another one of my students is principal horn. And then there's another 8D section in the San Francisco Opera and Ballet, where another one of my students, Kevin Rivard. So both Jeffrey Pilkington and Kevin Rivard are very insistent on their sections playing cons. And I believe, Nathaniel, you won Cleveland on a con, and that certainly had a good impact, I'm sure. Not that you weren't great on any instrument, but yeah, there's still 8D people out there. Oh, and Emily Gorland just said she's still playing. I'm getting some interesting messages. Wayne
Yeah.
had put a there in the chat, but I don't have access to the chat. I just see
Oh,
big corners of chat.
I think it's Wayne commented that Julie's sound cannot be restrained, and he asked the question. Mel was the last to leave the pit. Was that right?
Always. Mel always was the last, and he was there clapping for the singer. The biggest fan ever.
Well, and going back to your students for a second, could you talk? And maybe all three of you can chime in on this. But what kind of a pre-shot routine did you teach, sort of before excerpts and working with auditions?
Let's ask them. They'll tell you everything.
Nathaniel, why don't you go first since it's fresh in your mind?
Pre-shot, you mean like pre-audition routine?
Yeah, or the moment before you're going to play an act, either one, before the audition or as you're in the heat of the battle of the audition.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many amazing tools that Julie gives for, I would say, mental prep and audition prep. I would say probably one of the biggest tools that I do before any performance, any audition, is this meditation called 10 Toes. It's a kind of quick meditation in about sometimes 3 to 5 minutes for me, where it involves breathing and imagining your toes going up and down. For me, is huge in focusing and kind of centering before auditions. But boy, there's a lot of different things. There's the half smile of the Buddha that I do in between excerpts to kind of get me quite in the zone and make me very happy about the next excerpt. Gosh, I mean, there's literally so many different tools that I could talk about.
Yeah. What was the and kind of going? I'll ask the same thing of Jen in a second. But what was that phone call like to Julie when you won the Cleveland job?
It was pretty amazing. I gotta say, I think after my dad, she was my second call, and I was ecstatic to call her and give her the great news. I think she was pretty equally happy about it, but it was definitely a moment that I think about all the time and that I'll really never forget. Really sharing that. I remember I was just walking around in the Case University circle, kind of just pacing, kind of going nuts. And I just called her and I said, like, I won. And it's really, it definitely burned into my brain forever.
Well, you know, the call that I remember, Nathaniel, was in the taxi ride in Florida after you had done your private audition for Franz.
Yeah.
Called and said he wants, oh, I believe we were talking, and while we were talking, you got another call that interrupted us. You said,
Exactly.
"Oh, back," and the call was they just invited me to Cleveland to play a live audition.
Exactly.
That call was very memorable to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's kind of when I got my call back. I was like, I was telling her, yeah, I think it went really well, etc. And then they call me back and they're like, yeah, how soon can you be in Cleveland, basically?
Hey, so Julie, I was going to ask the same of you. What kind of things were you taking into the auditions that you guys had worked on mentally? I mean, Jen, I'm sorry.
Oh, cool. Do you want to say something though, Julie?
No, I
Okay,
was just gonna, my name isn't Jen. Just how to make it.
I would agree that there's a ton of tools. So when I was studying at Juilliard, Julie had Don Green come in and work with us, which was an amazing experience. And I mean, I've kind of since then, there have been a lot of other kind of coaches like that who have started to work with musicians and stuff. So, I mean, we have all these resources available, which are amazing, but I absolutely would not have ever known about them had it not been for your interest in them. And I could say the same for all kinds of body work too, just kind of taking care of your body and taking care of your mind and being a healthy and grounded and kind of genuine individual are all things that she taught me to do and she teaches her students to do. And it's kind of amazing. Yeah. I mean, I love the hand to heart meditation. I love the metta meditation. I love the Don Green centering one, which I call a hula hoop, and 10 toes. I mean, it's great to just have all these in your back pocket, but also, I would say just the overall thing of physical groundedness and listening and feeling as well as thinking, those kind of basic kind of concepts that you practice in and then you keep with you when you perform. I feel like those are the things that I always come back to in terms of like kind of bringing what you do in your practice room into your performances and trying to stay like as true to your own self and your own musical self and your own physical self. Like it's actually it's kind of like an ethos, which I really respect and try to, pass on to my students. But I find it immensely helpful whenever I kind of need help in a scary situation and I feel like I'm flailing. I'm like, okay, no, I know how to handle this. And it's from this kind of training. So it's really.
And maybe the three of you can kind of speak to this. Because the mental side of things obviously is so important. Are there any books that Julie is like, you have to read this book, you have to be, in her game of tennis or those kind of things? Did Nathaniel and Jen and Julie, you guys, any of them can comment on it?
I wouldn't say for me there was much of a book except for kind of names to explore. Like, I think for me, the kind of one of the biggest influences that I found is the name Donna Eden from Julie and that idea of energy medicine. And that took me down a long path of, finding the right energy medicine for me. So for me, the name Donna Eden, she kind of put me on this path down this idea of energy medicine. There's a lot of different not exercises exactly, but kind of things that I would do. There's a thing called Haas, which I know Julie loves when I demonstrate, which I will not do right now. But it's something that really gets me kind of up energy for kind of the things that I would need to be up energy for. But there's just a lot of different things like Donna Eden and Don Green, of course.
Nathaniel, I want to just clarify that the Haas that we're talking about came from yoga, from a place in Massachusetts called Kripalu. And that's one of the exercises we would do in yoga class to bring the energy up. That Donna Eden had a lot of things. We often would do Donna Eden exercises. Is that Marie? Oh my God.
Hi,
Oh,
sweetheart.
hey you. It's been too long since I've seen that cute face.
Once a decade, but who's counting?
Yeah, really. Good to see you.
Oh boy.
Uh-oh, Mark's gonna love this.
Oh, I will. I'll get it all in a little bit. while I have Julie, while I have all these students and Marie on here, because Marie, did you do Caruso a bit?
Actually, I met Mr. Caruso through Lori Frank and had a couple of lessons with him. Yes.
Yeah.
Because at the time he was experiencing some inner ear issues, and of course Lori knew that I was a Meniere's patient, so she was eager to have the two of us meet to kind of, talk to him and help him through that episode.
Because I wanted to ask Julie a little bit more about Mr. Caruso, because the videos that you have up are amazing. They're so explanatory. But for some people watching this, I guess I would say, first of all, they should go to julielandsman.com and watch your videos. But could you also maybe talk about some of the misconceptions people have with Caruso? Because I think that's what a lot of us that do it, that didn't really have so much influence with that, maybe do wrong sometimes.
Yeah, it makes me so sad that people overdo the method and then take slams at it, because it is the basis of my playing. It's the basis of these two stars on this screen. Is that accurate, Jen? And
Jen?
for sure, Nathaniel, because Nathaniel and I are still working together on some of the Carusos. In fact, mentoring Nathaniel as a teacher right now, which is really fun. But to teach the method and to learn it takes time. It's not something you can read about and know about. It's something you have to live and practice and embody over a long period of time. So I made the videos to clarify what has been a misinterpreted method, but trust me, people still misinterpret my videos, what? I made it so clear. What can I possibly do? So I did the best I could.
Now, for you, Caruso is the first thing you do in the day, right?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes it's still do, especially in a pandemic with zero in my book.
Yeah, yeah. Do you ever find it helps some people to do it at different points during the day? I know Håkan Hardberger talked about doing it at the end of the day for him.
I guess it's up to the individual. Jen, when do you do your carmines?
I break them up through the day. I do like 6 notes and lips, mouthpiece, horn, and basically that and snakes and noodles at the beginning of the day. And then I do the harmonics and the intervals at the end of the day. And for me, it makes a big difference to do the heavy lifting when I'm breathing better and when I'm sort of stretched out, and so my body is more calm and again more grounded, and to split it up so that, I guess the thing with me is that my mind goes insanely fast. So Caruso is incredibly important for me in terms of just slowing it down and keeping it to a nuts and bolts of like air and time. And it's just air and it's just time, and everything else can just wait. So for me, that's like kind of impossible struggle. So for me, it's a big kind of thing that I pepper throughout my practice a little bit. Like if I start to go a little distracted, then I'll sort of circle back to that just to kind of remind myself I do know how to stay on like 2 foundations that I know I can rely upon. So yeah.
And Nathaniel, what about you? When in the day do you do your Carusos?
Yeah, similarly, I start my day with my basic Caruso routine, and I do most of the fundamental exercises, but it definitely, I mean, sometimes at the end of the day, I'll do intervals down, but I mean, like Jen says, I definitely intersperse sometimes different things that I feel I need on the day. Like maybe I'll do basic noodles in my warm up, and then if I'm maybe trying to work on low register, I'll do pop out noodles kind of later in the day when I'm getting ready to work on low register. I would say it's a little adaptable for me, but I definitely start everything, start my whole day with a basic Caruso routine for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Marie, did you do any of that along the way?
Very little, very little. I did use, and I'm not sure, that I'm using the correct terminology here, but I did use his suggestion for kind of the thing to do at the end of a long playing session, where I would wind up all the way at the low end of the instrument, down on the low F sharp, and just air, air, no lip, just concentrate on a nice, easy, a relaxed release of tone into the instrument. And that always set me up for the next session.
Yeah. Julie, does all that sound familiar to you?
100%. And I think as you get more involved in the Caruso method, you can finesse what works for you, when you need it, when to back off, when to lay it on. For example, if you're building up for something like the ring cycle, I would bring out the dynamic studies. But on a normal routine day, those dynamic studies are so intense, I'll save them when I need to really build up some serious chops. Otherwise, most of my practicing is flexibility up and down through the registers. So there's a lot of ease of movement and register shifting without a lot of fuss and with an even sound. So I've got my priorities of what I'm looking for. So it just depends on the day. If Jen or Nathaniel have to play Mahler that night, they're not going to be doing any heavy lifting earlier. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can help you build up your strength, like you said, in a very healthy way. And then when you have to utilize that strength, you absolutely don't want to be doing your intervals before that, or, anything that kind of goes up super high. It's like it just would be foolish. So yeah, you definitely want to pace yourself in general as a player, no matter what. So, and Caruso's are just part of that.
Actually, a lot of things that
I'm sorry. No, I do have a question of Julie, because she's the master Caruso teacher. Julie, one of the things that I remember Mr. Caruso mentioning when we were talking about using his approach to warming down was that he would advocate playing a chromatic scale from bottom of the instrument all the way up, even if you don't hit the note that you think you want to hit. It's just mainly going with the ear and going all the way up and all the way back down before you start playing the low F sharp. Is that?
It's the opposite. You do the F sharp and then you do the chromatic scale up and down.
I could have sworn that he had me play the chromatic before.
Well, maybe you were a special case, dear.
Nathaniel, I guess one thing I wanted to mention, if people are watching this and they're wondering what snakes and noodles and all these different things are, all that stuff is very clearly laid out on Julie's website. So they should be able to find it. And there are PDFs of that on there as well. So that would be something to bring up. And since I have Marie on here, and we touched on this just a little bit ago, Julie, but you two, and now I would say Jen too, also are real pioneers for women in the brass world. And
Jen's a baby. Wait a minute.
Yeah, I don't count.
No.
Lucky beneficiary.
We featured Jen Montone at the conference that I hosted in Cincinnati, and she was one of the up and comers, right, Julie?
That's right. Was that the one where she was very pregnant, or was that in Denton?
No. She was just a kid.
Okay.
She and we had the three Stoneback girls playing trumpet. We had Jen on horn, and we had trombone. that used to be in, well, she's in St. Louis now. I'm having a senior moment again.
Amanda Stewart.
Amanda, yes. Amanda, you guys, remember we opened, I featured you all in the first program of the conference.
That was really special. And I gotta say, I mean, like my generation and the ones, you know, younger than me are absolutely the lucky beneficiaries of you guys, like your trailblazing. And yeah, that was really special to be a part of that conference. I mean, those are remarkable. It's so cool.
It was fantastic. And of course, your teacher, Julie, and the Met horn session, the Met gals, were in the IWBC Monarch Brass, which we even finished the conference off with a recording session. What was I thinking?
So fun, Marie, so fun.
Oh yeah, it was great. It was great, Julie. Wonderful memories. I mean, this lady, you can't begin to know how impactful it was to meet her when we played our one and only Monarch Brass Ensemble tour back in '96.
That was the fun. That was
Yeah.
like fun. The horn section was me, Michelle, Ann Scherer, and Kristen Yerkshite, right?
Yeah, Nancy Gooderl too.
Oh, and Nancy, that's
And
right.
Nancy.
There were 5 of us. Wild times, guys. Oh my God. We were insane.
And Marin Alsop conducted us.
Yeah.
And I have this, for days after our final concert, I had the sound, your sound in my ear and in my head, playing the Tomasi liturgical fanfares.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, that's a nasty, nasty horn part. And she just, like water rolling off a duck's back. Like,
Once upon a time, right?
yeah.
Did you two know each other before that Monarch Brass tour?
No, but we
Not
adopted,
really.
decided we were long lost sisters.
Well,
You know, of course, you know, back in those days, you know, we didn't have internet. I had heard the name, you know, I'd heard the name Susan Slaughter too, but I had never met Susan. I had never met Julie. We knew that there were other folks out there doing, you know, like other people doing what I was doing, but we just had never the opportunity to meet, except for when Susan put this group together, and that was like an amazing, amazing experience.
wow. Well, you two are definitely heroes for a lot of reasons to a lot of people. So I'm really glad I was able to hook you two up on here and getting Jen and Nathaniel and Emily, and I've had Earl Gardner, who I've been watching on television since I was a kid, watching this whole thing.
Let's give a shout out to Earl. I love you, Earl. Good to see you there. Give your wife a big hug from me.
Earl, can you say something?
I love you too, Julie.
Known each other since like 1971, right? Before
Yeah.
Mark was
Down in Philly.
So anyway, I just wanted to mention, I guess, that you two were such pioneers, and it's ironic that you hadn't met each other until that tour, because I'd imagine if we did have the internet, you probably would have called each other and said, "What about this? What about this?" Because I think, Marie, your situation when you wanted the job in Cincinnati, the trumpet section was a bit more supportive.
Oh yeah, extremely supportive. Well, they had a vested interest. Remember that most of the folks on that faculty, the brass section, were on the faculty at CCM. So
Right.
Yeah.
And both of you, ironically, both wound up playing with your former teachers, with Howard T. Howard and Mr. Blee in Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
that's a pretty cool thing. But Julie, I know that you said you probably need to call it a night pretty soon, but I just want to thank you so much for doing this, and people should really check your website. There's some fantastic playing on there. The Schumann Adagio and Allegro you mentioned is incredible on there. Nathaniel's thumbs up. Yeah, and that's
everything
Every-
she played.
everything. Yeah,
Serious.
yeah.
That is the one super inspiring website. And
Yeah.
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 Seriously, if you haven't heard that long call, you got to listen to it.
But Julie, thank you so much for doing this. And are you still there?
Can you see me? I'm
Now,
totally here.
now we
Hello.
now I see you. Oh, before we go, we should talk about Malcolm Gladwell just a little bit. Can you tell that story? Because you're famous.
Oh, you mean the night I got a phone call saying, "Would you like to talk about your audition?" I write.
Yes.
I write for the New Yorker magazine.
Yes. That one.
Okay, what do you want to know? So we talked about it for about an hour. And at the end of the interview, I said, "So, when's the article coming out in the New Yorker? Because I like that magazine." He said, "Oh, there is no article." And I hung up thinking, that's the last time I'm ever talking to a stranger about my life. That's it. It's over. Fast forward 2 years, my nephew Jordan calls me up and goes, "Aunt Julie, you're not going to believe this, but I was sitting on the toilet reading a book this morning." And do you know that you are featured in the last chapter of the national bestseller called Blink? I had no idea. Malcolm Gladwell, who was supposedly the writer for the New Yorker, who I hadn't at that point heard of, actually wrote a chapter about the anonymity of auditions behind a screen and his concept of thin slicing, which I use all the time when I teach or relate to people. How you figure out someone's character, how you figure out someone's playing in a thin slice. Well, that's what playing behind a screen and picking a winner's like. It's thin slicing. You don't see them. You don't know what color they are, what size they are, what their clothing is, what their sex is. So it was a great story to tell. Who knew that it was going to go national bestseller?
Wow.
Yep, that is in Blink, the last chapter. It's all about Julie.
A little
So
bit.
a little bit, yeah. You're prominent, I would say. But I wanted to make sure we brought that up so people could check that out because I thought that was pretty cool. And
Thank you. And thank you for inviting all my besties, not only Jen and Nathaniel, who I see all the time, but Marie, I miss you.
Love you. I miss you too, sweetie. It's yeah, too long between visits, you know. You're
You
still
gotta
based
catch
in
up.
you're still based in New York, right?
No, actually, right now I'm in Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've got a job at USC. So I'm teaching both Juilliard and USC for a couple years, and that's my dog. Come here, Ada. Okay. So no, I'm kind of transitioning to California life, selling my house in Nyack soon.
Wow.
Yep, I'll still have my place in the city, and I've got one more year after this at Juilliard. But I'm a Southern California girl. Can't you tell?
I was wondering, I'm looking at the tapestry behind you. I thought maybe you were in Santa Fe.
Well, that's Santa Fe. In fact, the furniture in the house right now here was my Santa Fe furniture, but New York is being moved out in a couple of weeks. Lots of changes. Changes.
Mazel tov.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
we're
dear.
gonna miss you like crazy, but we're really happy for you.
This is a dream true, guys. I wanted the Met job, got it. I wanted to move to Santa Barbara. Here I am. Life is
and you're right down
Good
the
for
street
you,
from
girl.
Maryland Horn.
from where?
From Maryland Horn is right. Maryland Horn is right down the street.
Pastor
Isn't
House.
that
when I-
amazing?
Yeah, that is amazing.
Really fun.
That is amazing. Well, thank you, Julie, and thank you, Marie and Jen and Nathaniel and everybody that tuned in, and Earl Gardner. Oh my gosh, man, I've been listening to you on Saturday Night Live every weekend. So it's a pleasure to see you, and I hope I'll get you on here sometime soon, along with Jen. So
I'm honored to be here. And Julie, I love you, and that's all I got to tell you. And Carmine is, Carmine forever. It's like I still do Carmine. So
Right?
yeah,
Every day.
every day. especially now with all like, since everything stopped. I mean, because I would do it, I did it, pretty regularly, but just like, 6 notes but I got back to basics when everything shut down. So I'm back into it. So
Good.
yes, Julie.
Good to see you, sweetheart. All of you. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for
Thank you.
bringing my.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you guys so
Thanks,
much.
Mark.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks so much. Good night.
Happy
Take
Thanksgiving.
care. Happy
Yeah, Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Mark. Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you.